Office. Thank you. Agenda item number 1, public question time. Do we have any questions? No public questions. Agenda item number 2, apologies and substitutions. Tracy, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I get to the apologies, because it will make sense then, we have a change in substitutes, which has been notified by the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Christine Weenan has been changed as a substitute for Councillor Matthew Downey, and she is substituting for Councillor Alison Whelan this evening. And we also have apologies from Councillor Brown, and Councillor David Ambrose Smith is substituting, and from Councillor Goldsack. And I understand that Councillor Austin is going to be a little bit late.
Thank you, Tracy. Leads us to agenda item number 3. Any declarations of interest? Does any member have any interest to declare for any of the items on the agenda?
Sorry, Chairman, I was distracted. Just to note that I'm a trustee of East Cambs CLT in relation to item 19 under exempt matters.
Thank you, Councillor Valley. Agenda item number 4, the minutes. We need to approve the minutes from the meetings held on the 22nd of June. Does any member here have wish to raise any points of accuracy with any of the minutes? If not, I will propose. Do I have a seconder? Julia Huffer. Thank you, Councillor Huffer. That's fine. We can get that one approved. Thank you. Agenda item number 5, as chairman announcements. I've only got a couple here. I've invited John Hill, the managing director, and Nigel Ankers, finance manager at East Cambs Trading Company, to attend and contribute to the relevant items on the agenda. In order to facilitate John Hill, I tend to actually change the order of the agenda and take item 12, the ECTC annual accounts, as the next agenda item. Therefore, can I ask John and Nigel to please introduce this item?
Thank you, Chairman and members, for being so accommodating on the agenda. Thank you very much. As you introduced, Nigel Ankers, the finance manager of East Cambs Trading Company, is going to present the annual accounts, which are for noting, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. So these are the financial statements for East Cambs Trading Company for the year end 31st of March 2022. If it's okay, Chair, I'll just walk people through the accounts and assume no knowledge. So apologies if people do have knowledge of a set of accounts. Pages 1 and 2, the director's report, in which it states the director's responsibilities with respect to these statements, namely that they must only approve these accounts if they're satisfied and give a true and fair view of the affairs of the company, and in doing so have selected appropriate accounting policies and applied them consistently, and that any judgments or estimates are reasonable and prudent, and the accounts are prepared on a going concern basis only if it's correct to do so. And finally, that all relevant audit information has been provided to the auditors. Pages 3 to 5 is the audit report from Price Bailey. In there, they confirm they've conducted the audit on the statement and the notes. And in their opinion, they do give a true and fair view of the company's affairs as at 31st of March 22 and have been prepared according to the latest regulations. Page 4 contains more information on Price Bailey's audit and that there's nothing else that they're required to bring to the director's attention. Page 5, a bit more on the methodology of the audit. Page 6, profit and loss account. These numbers have changed since I presented the management accounts for the 21-22 financial year at the previous committee. When the loans with combined authority were renegotiated in 2020, and with particular regard to the interest-free period that was negotiated as part of that change, we should, as in the account, have made an estimate using discounted cash flows about the interest over the remaining period of the loan. And it's these discounted cash flows that should have been used in the accounts rather than the actual interest figures and loan balances. And as the new figures are done on the basis of the present value of the loan, but in 2 years' time, that leads to a liability that is lower than the actual figure that was in the accounts. So if you have an obligation to pay £100 in 2 years' time and you discount it at 2%, because that's the interest rate that we've got on those loans, that would be worth £96 in 2 years' time. So we write down the £100 obligation to 96 and credit the P&L with the difference of 4. So when we did that for 2020-21, this created an additional value in the P&L of 447,000, which you can see there on the line that says valuation, losses, gains on fair value on debt instruments. That's the change to 2020-2021. It was material enough to require the accounts to be restated. We did the same exercise in 2022, but by that stage, the loan only had a year to go. So continuing my analogy earlier, the £100 in a year's time at 2% is only worth £98. Compared to the £96 that we had it valued at, we put £2 back. So on that, in 21-22, we added or debited the profit and loss of 262,000, i.e. adding it back to the P&L. The net effect of the 2 years was to increase the profits by about £160,000. We also had to carry out a similar evaluation on the debts due under the project at Kennet. Obviously a much lower change on that. Under those calculations, the value of the Kennet debt was deemed to be worth £65,000 less than we had it in the books. So that left the final net profit for 21-22 at 786,000, following an amended loss of 153,000 from the previous year. So I have to stress that the actual values that we pay to the combined authority and that we receive from Kennet won't change. It's just the carrying value in the accounts are altered each year to reflect the present value of those cash flows. So it's a paper transaction, if you like. Turning to page 7, you can see there that the debt on the balance sheet, the debt for the Kennet income has been split between non-current, which is due in more than 1 year, with the balance in trade receivables, and the current assets as that's due at the end of this month. The previous loan agreement with the council, which was in force at the 31st of March 2022, 3.6 million of the loan was due to ECDC in July 23, so that's classified as a non-current liability. And so the changes to the profit have meant that the year end, the company had a net asset position of 59,000. Page 9 confirms that the only changes next to those in the P&L. Page 10 is the cash flow statement that reconciles the opening balance of 208,000 to the closing balance of 1.12 million, and shows that most of the 6.2 million that we generated from operating activities was used to repay the loans from the combined authority. And then finally, the notes on pages 11 through 27 add explanation or detail to the statements. I think for me, the key ones are note 1.2 on page 11 has some commentary on the work involved in confirming that preparing the accounts on a going concern basis was appropriate, with specific reference to the current cost of living issues. Note 6 on page 19 is still to be confirmed following the late changes. We still need to clarify that one certain. It's not expected to change, although we do need to put in the value of losses carried forward. Note 22 on page 26 explains the new loan agreed with East Cambs District Council, as although it's not effective until the 2022-23 financial year, it is considered a significant subsequent event, so it's added as a note. And finally, note 24 on pages 27 through 29 explains the entries involved in the restatement of last year's comparative figures. I've hopefully just tried to go through. That's it. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Nigel, and thanks for going for those many figures there. We have actually had a question in advance, which I'm hoping has been answered satisfactorily. Councillor Dupre.
If that was, has it been answered satisfactorily, then the question is not, then the answer is not really. The issue about the withdrawal of mortgage, what we call these days mortgage products, is just one example in the question. And I was hoping for a more broader explanation of the other many general turbulences in the economy at the moment and the different ways in which all of those factors might be impacting on or likely to impact on the company. But we've only just got the number of houses in Haddenham.
Can I suggest that this item is obviously just for noting, and so if you have any further questions that you perhaps raise them with Nigel outside of this meeting.
Thank you. I don't think it was a further question. I think it was just a comment that the question hadn't really been answered.
Members, on that basis, are we happy to note? Oh yeah, sorry. Yes.
I did have a couple of other points, if I may. The first one was on page 6 of the accounts and the valuation losses gains on fair value on debt instruments. There isn't a note in, or there isn't a record of a note in the accounts explaining that. Would there not normally be a note explaining such significant variances?
No, not for 21-22. They're in there at their correct values. There's a note for 2020-21 simply because they were changed from the accounts that were presented last year. But no, it wouldn't be necessary to have a note for those.
And the other point was on, sorry, page 7, non-current assets, the second item there, right to use assets. I think it's a right of use asset. That's what it says in the notes. So that needs to be corrected because that's just factually wrong.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Harris.
Just one question. On page 19, you state that there is no liability to UK corporation tax either for the year, this year, or the previous year. Could you explain why there is no liability for corporation tax?
That was the note that I mentioned just then that still needs updating properly. The reason is that we have had losses in previous years and cumulative losses. So that's the.
Okay, so just so that I understand that, it's because you're making losses, therefore you don't have to pay corporation tax.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions, members? On that basis.
Sorry, that was, you said questions. It wasn't particularly a question. I just wanted to put on record our thanks for all those involved in East Cambs trading company, from the markets, the parks and open spaces, and Palace Green Homes for their efforts in producing a good set of accounts and good report and good productivity and lots of stuff happening. I think it's really good to see it in such healthy condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. On the basis, I'm happy to note this item and thank John and Nigel. Many thanks. We now move back to the formal agenda, which I believe is now agenda item 6. And I'm happy to introduce Sally to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My report is recommending expenditure of up to £200,000 of SIL funding towards the new recreation ground in Haddenham. This will provide 6.5 acres of recreation space, allow for 3 additional football pitches and provide a link which will create a circular walk. Haddenham Parish Council have secured 650,000 of the 850,000 required and are requesting a SIL contribution, the remaining £200,000 needed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sally. Can I have a proposer for this item? Councillor Hunt, I'm happy to second. And then if we can have any questions, comments or questions to the officers, please. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Just a comment, Sally. It's obviously a very big project. I must congratulate the parish council in getting that amount of money together. Really applaud them for it and doing something for their village. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Yes, it's always a story behind every sheet of just plain facts. This Haddenham Parish Council have really worked very hard over very many years to try and find a second playing field or recreation ground, because the one they've got in the centre of the village is just not, it just isn't enough. All their sports teams, particularly their football, are going very well, and lots of children are playing. And they managed to find a farmer who'd got a bit of land a bit near the central, relatively near the centre of the village. It was level and well drained, and there's a huge amount of emotional investment gone into this project, and I can only wish it well. And I was very much involved with it when, well, not involved with it, but I was keen to see more and more kids playing football, and that's what they're doing on this place, and so it's a good thing, and I commend it.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. Just one thing, that my understanding is that the planning application for reserved matters relating to access for this project was withdrawn, and therefore there is no planning consent for access to this project. My group wanted to consider making an amendment to make that a condition of giving the money, that it had to have all the necessary planning permissions in place. We were told that that is customary procedure before funding is released. I just wanted to be absolutely assured on that and to have that on the record of the meeting before deciding not to press that to a formal amendment.
Yes, it is a condition in the funding agreement, which both ourselves and Haddenham Parish Council would sign.
Thank you. In that case, I won't press an amendment on that point.
Any other questions, members?
Just a comment, I want to add my congratulations to Haddenham Parish Council for bringing this forward. It's nice to see money being invested in projects of this nature. It's exactly what the SIL is there for and should be used for. You know, Haddenham's been a growing community, and it's fantastic to see this getting off the ground. And it's nice that this council is putting money into community projects that have been brought forward by the community, unlike Cambridgeshire County Council, who seems to like taking it away.
It sounds to me like that we are all fairly favourable on this. So unless I see any objections, I think we can safely say show of hands for yes. It's unanimous. Thank you, members. That brings us on to agenda item 7, High Street grants. And this is Martin. Yes, if I could ask Martin Smith to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this might be familiar because we've done some of these before, but this one is relatively straightforward. It is capital grant scheme fund utilising £100,000 of the Market Town programme money that was allocated by the Combined Authority. What we're seeking today is approval of the scheme eligibility and the application form, which is in Appendix 1, and agree that we can open the fund on the 10th of October and close it on the 11th of November.
Thank you, Martin. May I have a proposer and seconder for this?
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy to propose this, and in so doing, I'm also happy to accept the proposed amendment from our colleagues over the way there. It seems like a totally pragmatic thing to do, and I agree with it, and so I'm happy to put that as an altered recommendation and propose this paper, and look forward to the schemes coming forward, and hope that this fund gets fully taken up. Actually, we really want to encourage applications to come forward to this and get this money out there and doing good.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second the proposal with the amendment. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
I'd just like to say how glad I am that Councillor Bailey decided to accept this. I think it's this is a proposal we all support, we all want to see taken up. It's an excellent way of investing in the city, and our concern was just to make sure that you have a view of all the applications for making the final decisions. But I think that's very rational, very sensible, and really how nice it is to see us all working together as a solid ecumenical unit on 2 items in a row. Long may this continue.
I think. Yeah. We've had a question in advance on this one, and just wanted to check once again that had been received and responded.
Chair, I've got a couple of questions on this arising from the answer. I'm not sure I like the term like-minded, because it strikes the wrong tone to me. It's the kind of language you use about people like us as opposed to people not like us. I'm not sure that I have a replacement for it other than just deleting it and say other stakeholders, which seems to me to cover the ground, unless you want to, unless you are fearful that there will be people coming along with the deliberate aim of making the centre of Ely really shabby, which I don't think is what you're thinking at all. And I'm struggling to see what work the word like-minded is doing there.
Through you, Chair, I think it's absolutely fine to strike like-minded through. The intention was, I was talking to Martin about this earlier, is what kind of organisations were you aiming? It's parish council, so we could say other stakeholders, for example, a parish council, and that would give other groups such as those that yes, it doesn't just apply solidly to businesses. So happy, Chair, for you to take out like-minded in the criteria and replace it with other stakeholders, for example, parish councils.
Thank you. That was my first point on the responses to the questions. On the second one, location, I'm really not sure that location is clear as a word in here, and I think it might be more sensible to say something like premises and curtilages, so that you're not getting applications for the same piece of ground, which is what you're trying to avoid. I think partly that will be avoided by revising the procedure for reviewing the applications, the amendment that has just been accepted, which I hope will make this somewhat of a less patchy kind of scheme that it had the potential to be, and I hope we'll be able to get around that. But I think location is a bit too broad. What does a location mean? Only one application in Buttermarket, or whatever. It's not clear. So that would be my suggestion on that one. And the third one about the demonstrating the ability to meet the overarching purpose of the fund. What evidence do we have that the physical appearance of the centre of Ely is actually preventing us contributing to doubling the GVA of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough? What evidence is there to support the conclusion?
Through you, Chair, I will answer the second point, and then Martin, if you could expand on the third point on evidence of doubling GVA. On the second point, location, if members are happy, we can absolutely change location to say premises or in the curtilage of. More than happy with that, and I'll defer, Martin, if you could expand on the GVA, please. Thank you.
Yes. So what we did very early on in the process with the Market Town programme is we commissioned an evidence-based report on how we should utilise the fund for Ely and so on. That included stakeholder engagement, and one of the kind of highest, well, a highly ranked issue that came back was the condition of the high street and things like shop fronts and that sort of thing. So that really links into, if you think about all the other parts of the programme that we've done in terms of improving the high street and improving the facilities in the high street and the connectivity and stuff, this is kind of the last element of that we're pulling in to make that work.
Thank you. I think that's still slightly tenuous. It may well be that it's a very live issue for people, stakeholders, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily clear from that response that it addresses the GVA issue. Can I just finally come back to the location issue? There isn't a map, and I asked for a map and I was told there isn't one of the area covered by this. But the city centre area is described as including Lynn Road. Well, Lynn Road goes right up to the Princess of Wales. And is it really the intention to include everything along the whole drag of Lynn Road in this scheme? If not, then I think it needs either a narrower description or it just needs a map.
So again, it's not the intention for the whole of Lynn Road. Obviously, there are retail premises in that. So I take your point.
We can narrow the definition of the Lynn Road to make it clear which properties on Lynn Road. So so whether it's certain businesses on Lynn Road nearest to the town centre rather than going all the way out. If members wish, we could do a map.
Councillor Trapp and then Councillor Bailey.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great idea. Sprucing up the place. One question I was going to ask is, since it is a visual thing, a visual improvement, might it not be good to suggest that people send in photographs at the moment of what it looks like? I mean, a suggestion, because it actually would add to the flavour. The other thing is it retrospective? So is it only for those who have put in bids, or at least have they already done it? And can they be paid for this? But I think that'd be unfair. So I think that's ought to be put there as well. And the other thing is, maybe actually it's not the district council, but the city council. But for instance, when I was sitting in the group room where Wyman's consigned, I could see the street sign for Egremont Street. Very nice, cast iron, everything. But it's shoddy. I mean, it's rusty. That'd be lovely if someone actually spruced those signs up, those street signs. But I think that's a city council thing. But that's the kind of thing this grant should cover, actually.
I think we note some of those comments, but to confirm that it's not retrospective.
Thank you.
Can't claim for works already carried out.
Could it be put in there?
We could make it clear in when people apply, we say no, if this is retrospective, and no.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. Just following the discussion about location. So criteria 3 talks about and inclusive of interconnecting streets in this area. I think we need to be clear about that as well. Does that mean streets going off any of those streets or streets that interconnect 2 of those streets? I think it needs to be clear. I'm thinking, for example, about the somewhat infamous Steeple Row, which is not interconnecting of those streets, but is off one of those streets, just by way of example. So I think that follows along with the map discussion, really.
Through you, Chair, it seems that members would be more comfortable if we rather than define locations, if we did a map ringed area.
Yeah, I think so.
To make it much clearer, yeah.
And then for applicants as well. And with the basic intention that we, I think we all intuitively know what we really mean by Ely city centre, but we need to make it clear, don't we?
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Newnham Street's not on there either, so it is important that a map is required, I believe.
Just to confirm, I can do a map.
Excellent. So we have a map from that conversation. Brilliant.
That will be of that area, will it?
If there's no further questions, thank you, Martin.
This one will be if members could do what they can to promote the schemes. We had an issue with the Soham one where it's been undersubscribed, and we have to now rethink about how we're going to promote Soham one, change the criteria, for example. So it would be helpful if members could push the scheme out, please. Thank you.
Right, thank you. We're now on to agenda item 8.
Take a vote.
Oh,
Do you want to take a shot? Yeah.
can we have a raise of hands for the map and acceptance to note? Thank you. Unanimous. Agenda item 8, the local council tax reduction scheme policy review. Can I ask Ian Smith to introduce this item, please? Ian.
Thank you, Chair. The paper sets out the options for the local council tax reduction scheme for 2023-24, with a recommendation to leave the scheme unchanged. The reasons behind this being that it's the wrong time to increase the contribution, but equally it is felt important that everybody should pay a contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Can I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations? Julia Huffer, I'm happy to second. And then we have an amendment. Do I have a proposer and seconder for the amendment? Councillor Dupre.
As on the
Councillor Wheeler.
sheet, yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to deal with the amendment first. Councillor Dupre.
Okay, thank you. The amendment is simply to delete the words retain the 8.5% reduction scheme and insert adopt a 0% reduction scheme, and then delete remains at 91.5% and insert increases to 100%. That is, I think, what is described as being option 2 at 4.2. The rationale for the second option is indeed described in the paper to support low-income households during the cost of living crisis. I'm not convinced that a simple standpoint of everybody must pay something is a reasoned argument in the face of the devastation that those on very low incomes are facing at the moment. We are not clear at the moment whether benefits, or the government is not clear at the moment whether benefits will be uprated by inflation. And that will be, if that doesn't happen, that will be a huge blow to people on the lowest incomes. They are already battered with increases in their cost of living for food, for energy, for the essentials of life. And in fact, it has been shown that inflation for basic products in supermarkets and shops is far greater than inflation for foods and provisions at the higher end of the range. Some products have escalated wildly in terms of cost at the very basics kind of level of groceries, while other products haven't changed price or have barely changed price in several years. And it is the poorest who are being absolutely walloped. And it strikes us that for a comparatively small amount of money, and it's interesting that no costings were put in the paper for those other options, but we have obtained costings from officers for options 2 and 3. It strikes us that at a time of acute financial pressure on the poorest households, who are not being helped at all and are even being told that their benefits may be reduced or withdrawn. They are facing an absolutely terrible time. And now, well, if not when, now, to help out families in desperate need in the worst cost of living crisis we have known for decades. And that's why we are putting this amendment with the hope that that will then be put to full council. And I would urge people very strongly to at least consider and preferably support this amendment on behalf of the many struggling families now across East Cambridgeshire and beyond.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Does seconder Christine Whelan wish to speak?
I'll reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Whelan. Members, comments, discussion? Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Of course, we have carefully considered this because it was in the paperwork as a potential option. It of course needs careful consideration. We are in unprecedented times. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Resulting from COVID, the war in Ukraine, it rises in inflation, etc. It's a very difficult time that people are facing. I stand very proud of our record of not having increased the East Cambs element of council tax for 9 years in a row in this authority. So our element of the district level council tax remains the lowest in the county at £142.14 for an average band D. I seem to recall that figure. I note that that is not the case for other authorities in Cambridgeshire, most of whom have taken the opportunity to increase their council tax, not all, and many by the maximum amount available, including, of course, Cambridgeshire County Council, which has a far, far greater impact. I think East Cambs' share of the council tax bill on a Band D property is about 7 or 8% of the overall bill. So, obviously the majority of people's council tax payments do go to the county council, which, clearly has very different responsibilities, including children's and adult social care, something close to my own heart in the past. There are different problems for different councils, but I am very mindful of the fact that people are facing a very large council tax bill because the county council put up its council tax by the maximum amount available, only to put half of the money in its general reserves fund. And the fact that we sit here as East Cambs on the lowest council tax in the whole of Cambridgeshire, very low council tax compared with many other authorities across the UK, and on a record of 9 years of freezing while still delivering good services. I find this difficult. I do think it's an important principle that people do realise that there is council tax to be paid and to pay something. And actually 91.5% discount is still a very generous scheme, having looked at other authorities' schemes across the country, and in Cambridgeshire. In Cambridgeshire, they vary between 67% discount up to 100% discount in Cambridge City, and for certain types of people in Huntingdon as well. But we are very much there in the mix and on a par with other councils in our area. Of course, if we changed it to 0% this year, it would be, I think, quite difficult to change it again in the future and bring back, a payment for people. That also causes its own difficulties. And so really, I think, what's important here is people's ability to pay and what support and help there is for people if they do get into trouble. And I feel assured that we have a very good community housing and advice service that does look to help people early. Just taking the East Cambs element of a Band D council tax bill, the 8.5% that we do ask people with qualifying criteria to pay is £12 a year. It's £1 a month that we're actually asking people to pay towards their council tax. If you look at the whole bill that for a Band D, it's £14.41 per month. So I'm aware of schemes that are there to help people if they get into financial difficulty, and obviously our housing and advice team looks to do that as early as possible. There are a number of schemes available, but in particular, we do support people through the Household Support Fund, which is funds that are given by central government, administered by Cambridgeshire County Council. We're one of the trusted organisations to administer that for people. And actually, people can make 2 applications per year. So they can get a payment of £100 each time, and actually that would cover this. They can't use it directly for council tax, it's for food and energy, but obviously it would free up their household income to a level that would more than cover this requirement. So for all those reasons, whilst I applaud the sentiment behind this, I think there are safety nets there for people. There are other support funds available as well, and I do think it's important that knowing that we keep this in place and note that it is, a generous scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, of course, common sense dictates that I've written in my notes almost exactly what Councillor Bailey had to say. And, the sort of notes I've made are, we haven't put the count. If we do care about people and we actually put it into hard facts and hard actions, what I see is a political statement coming from the other side of the chamber. And I find it very difficult to understand how a group who looks at us and puts their council tax up when they are in control, like in County Council, by 4.99%, which is, and then dismisses it as, oh, it's only a cup of coffee a day, as though everybody had the ability to buy expensive cups of coffee. I think we show our true colours, not our political activity and offensiveness, when we don't charge for car parking, when we don't charge for toilets. And I mean, for a council that is about to or highly likely to introduce a congestion charge, which is going to cost £5 per car per day for low paid workers who come into Cambridge and can't afford to live in Cambridge. And when that same council, and in some cases the same councillors, can sit there and criticise us when we're talking about £12 a year, and they're talking about sticking up the council tax and absolutely ripping off just about everybody and taking the maximum amount from the public that the law allows. I think really there should be some self-analysis done over there and realise that politics shouldn't come into this. This is just a political move to try and score points. And I think it's really unfortunate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. I'm surprised that Councillor Hunt did not widen it to the government in power at the moment, the confusion that has caused. But I want to keep to our neck of the woods, not everywhere else. I support this. I mean, I think we ought to be looking at this. And I'm just going to be very brief. One says in 4.4, it's continued to believe that the principle of everyone making at least a small contribution is actually contradicted by 3.12, where there's a scheme for pensioners who can receive a maximum of 100% reduction. So already we have 100% reduction for one group of people. Also, it's a slight bit about wording. I don't like the word customers. I think they're residents. So signposting customers, I think signposting residents, but they're not customers. We're not a business. It is residents. So there, I'd like to stop there. That's all I want to say at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. Councillor Harris.
One simple observation. Councillor Bailey said that once you allow 100% reduction, it becomes very difficult to reintroduce it the next year. Now, that, of course, is also true of council tax more generally. When you spend years not raising council tax, it becomes progressively more difficult to do it. In other words, there is exactly the same trap. Council tax becomes a kind of fetish. It's a demonstration of virtue and of a particular kind of principle. And heaven knows, nobody likes paying taxes. Council tax is not a particularly progressive tax. It should have been reformed a long time ago. One hopes it will be at some point. But our concern here is simply with the basic principle. We don't like the principle that everybody needs to make a contribution because then they know what council tax is. Of course, under normal circumstances, everybody would indeed pay 100% of their council tax because they'll be earning enough money to do it and they will not be in distress and they will be able to pay the tax that is most necessary to keeping local authorities running without feeling a particularly bad pinch as a result of doing so. What we're saying is that we should do what we can in this authority in extraordinary times and not get too hung up on the basic principle that it's only £12 a year. This is true. This is why remitting it would be a very, very small sum, but it would at least be a gesture of solidarity. And can I just say, there is one person on this committee who always politicizes everything. That's the man. We are not trying to do any kind of political grandstanding. We know perfectly well that council tax is a charged area, and it's something that has been made a very strong part of the administration's positioning every year. So we know perfectly well that it's a difficult and delicate area. But we also feel that in this case, we should do what we can if we can. And if you want to talk about the congestion charge, again, we should have a proper debate about it, which would take us back to the last Conservative administration that proposed a congestion charge in 2008 for the city of Cambridge, as we now know. And we wouldn't have to be hypocritical about it, but that's not the topic for this. Can we just stick to this and try to put aside the principle that everyone must pay and say that those who are able to pay should pay, those who are not able to pay should be allowed not to pay. That's what a progressive approach to taxation is surely all about. That's what we stand for. That's our principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Hoffer?
I take on board Councillor Trapp's point that this should remain local, but sadly we can't extricate ourselves from the whole of Cambridgeshire County Council, who quite deliberately put their council tax up for the maximum amount, which affects every single household. Every single household. Our council tax is historically low whilst providing services. The fact that the Liberal Democrats think that the answer to everything is increased taxes. Yes, you're quite right, Councillor Harries. Nobody likes paying tax, but we all have to do it. You know, and there are other funds available for people who find themselves in difficulty that are available to everybody and are handled through East Cambs. You know, maybe when you're slinging the mud around, be careful where you throw it because it might come back and stick on the Liberal Democrats. This is just once again another headline in another leaflet.
I'll allow you to come back, Councillor Harris.
The whole congestion charge business is simply your election campaign. So every time we talk about a different subject, back we come with something else. I know you didn't, but when you talk about how this is just another headline for another leaflet, we've actually walking on eggshells over this. We're trying not to make it like that. I would promise you, we would not put this on any leaflet.
I think at this point, I think we ought to go to the vote on the amendment. I think it's been debated enough. So those in favour
Excuse me, I haven't spoken.
Sorry, councillor Whelan, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I would like to reiterate what my colleagues on this side have said. And certainly councillor Dupre and councillor Harris, people on the lowest income and lowest levels of income will suffer from the rise of the cost of living tremendously. And though, yes, there will be help from other sources, the government and everything else, but people will still struggle with the rise of the cost of living. And this is the reality that we are all, that the people are facing. I feel that this is a small cost to our council to help with people or those in most need. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Whelan. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against?
So the amendment is lost by 4 votes to 6.
We now move to the original proposal. Councillor Happer, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing further to say on this matter.
As seconder, I'd just like to mention that option 2, it's an interesting point, but I think on the basis of what's been covered already, you know, we are offering a 91.5% discount, which is actually much more than many councils are doing. And for the reasons, for the conversations we had, I would support this wholeheartedly. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. And I support that too. But in so doing, I just want to check and make sure that we're doing everything that we need to and that we can. I know we've got specific cost of living help webpage on East Cams website. So anybody can go to, if you just plug in East Cams cost of living into any decent search engine, you will find a dedicated page with all sorts of sources of information, advice and links to help. One of those being the Household Support Fund, but just to make sure that it is also highlighted on any relevant, the relevant pages about council tax as well. I think that would be an important thing to do so that people looking for it don't have to go searching, and that it is easily available and easy to find, so that people can get help if and when they need it, and to know that that help is there, and that we're not doing nothing. We're doing very considerable amounts, and help is there for people.
Thank you, councillor Bailey. There's no further comments, then councillor Trapp.
It seems a little bit inefficient that one has to apply for these things when we could have actually in one stroke said, no, you just by the by, this is it. You don't have to pay.
That absolutely isn't the case. To get the benefit of the local council tax reduction scheme, you are required to provide significant detail and evidence.
On that basis, I believe we need to go to a vote on the original proposal. Those in favour? Those against?
Carried by 6 votes to 4.
Thank you, Tracy. Agenda item number 9. If I could ask Ian Smith again to introduce his item.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, to note that this paper represents a point in time, and the figures will continue to change up until the budget is approved by council in February, as further information becomes available. The main concern for the council will be the cost of inflation on its budget, and you will note that the net cost of service has increased by over £800,000 between years, between 22, 23 and 23, 24, based on the current estimates. Members are also asked to recommend to council the adoption of the long-term entity premium as detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I'm happy to propose this. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, councillor
Reserve my
Bailey.
right to speak.
I believe we've also had a question in advance on this one. Councillor
Yes, and
Dupre.
if you're asking me about my view about the answer, again, the question was what work has been done. The answer leads me to believe that no work has been done because it doesn't say that. It simply says that it will be updated. If that's wrong and work has been done to revisit those assumptions, could the officer tell us, or could you tell us indeed as Vice Chair, what work has been done to revisit those assumptions and what you have found to date, appreciating that it may and will change?
Yeah, I mean, the MTFS model is continually being updated. It has been updated since the point that his paper was reduced. Obviously, his paper was reduced probably nearly a month ago now because of the issues with the delay of the committee. So things have been updated. For example, one thing which has come to light literally in the last few days, as just as an example, is that the government funding for 23-24 is likely to be a cash equivalent amount to what we've had in the current year, less. They are actually going to reduce how much we get in cash because this year's cash, they say, was to fund the NI increase. And as the NI increase is not now going to happen, they're going to reduce the amount of cash we're going to have next year. Now, I don't have exact figures for that, but things like that have been picked up since this report was produced.
Thank you for that example. That's helpful.
Any further questions from members?
Just a comment, if I may. I just want to thank Ian for his ongoing work and the rest of the management team for their constant vigilance on bearing down on cost and making sure we're as efficient as we can be. And I note with great pleasure that our current draft budget for 23-24 sits there as we stand today. Of course, it is only a snapshot balanced, and that's based on a 0% council tax rise. And also that we are currently able to show a balanced position for the following year as well. So for a long time, this council's had a background of being able to show a balanced budget for 2 years in advance, which I think has stood us in incredibly good stead in being ahead of issues, financial issues. And has enabled us to do what we do in terms of the financial running of this authority. Something I think was recognised in February this year when we set our budget, and our colleagues from the opposite side of the chamber actually did call for a 0% council tax rise, and that's the basis for these figures in 23-24, and obviously we look forward to hearing what they've got to say in February next year on that subject. But thank you very much to officers for your continued good stewardship of our finances.
Thank you, councillor Bailey. We now move to the debate, particularly on item 2.2. Any questions? No. In which case we are requested to vote on this. Any objections? Are we all of those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Members are asked to note the report and the forecast revenue overspend for the year. This is based on inflation forecast at the end of June. The finance team will shortly be producing a further report for the half year, which will be presented to the next meeting of committee. Committee is also asked to approve the carry forward of capital underspends from 21-22 to be used in the current year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Can I have a proposer and seconder?
Sorry, Chairman, can I just on one point, and Ian can tell me if I've got this wrong, in the recommendation, is it paragraphs 3.7 and 3.8 rather than 3.8 and 3.9? I was just when I was reading it earlier today.
Thank you, Tracy. Make that amendment. Yes, do we have a proposer and seconder for it? Councillor Hunt? Yes. Seconder, Councillor Ambrose Smith and Councillor Trapp.
Point 5.1, I think it's the fifth word should be overspend, not underspend.
Any further questions to the officer? Okay, we now move on to the debate on that. Any comments? Okay, in which case can we please vote? Those in favour? Again, unanimous. Thank you, members. So the final item for noting, for decision is item number 11. And can I ask Maggie, oh, that's you. In the absence of Maggie Camp, can I ask Emma Grimmer to introduce?
Thank you, Chair. Maggie's away on holiday and she would have been here, but this is a rearranged meeting, so it's she's asked me to present the report. So having been through the report, it's been a long process for Maggie working with Bottisham to get to the stage where we're at. The report is very detailed, sets out clearly the next steps that we go through, what the options are for members here today. If members approve this today, it will go to full council for formal approval. So I'm not okay with every detail within the report. I think it's clearly set out. It's recommending that we say to council, yes, let's go through the CPO. This is the council satisfied this is the only way to secure the land currently owned by the trust, and this is just purely a means of facilitating the delivery of an asset in Bottisham. So don't intend to add anything more to that, Chairman. I'm happy to take questions away from Maggie to answer on her return as well.
Thank you, Emma. I'm happy to propose this rather complicated document. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunt and Councillor Trapp. If you would like to have an arm wrestle, that's fine. Councillor Trapp or Councillor Hunt. Thank you. As Emma has said, she's happy to answer any questions you may have.
No. I mean, if there are any questions, I know quite a bit about it, so that I can answer any questions through the chair, of course.
No questions. Okay, therefore I'm happy to say that we are all happy to note this.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not a note, sorry.
It's actually-
Therefore, I am happy to propose this, which I think is an excellent idea, and therefore can we have a show of hands? All those in favour? Excellent, thank you very much. For noting, agenda item 13, COVID lessons learned, and can I ask Emma Grimmer to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chairman. We recently went through an internal audit which looked at our strategic response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and they recommended that we bring to members' attention in one place a report which shows some of the lessons that we learned during COVID. So this item is for noting, but just wanted to go through a few of the key themes with you. So with the initial response, there were two phases to it, the initial response and the recovery response, but two actually overlapped for quite a significant period of time when we were into recovery as well as still being in the response stage. So there were main structures that we set up. So we go through the governance and decision making. There were several officer-led groups that were stood up. You got business continuity. You had the community groups, the business grants that distributed those, and then the remote working. And that was, each of those groups was led by a member of the CMT, and then through to setting up specific teams to deal with both the initial response and the recovery of that. Everyone knew throughout the pandemic what they were doing. So through the structures that we put in place, there was clearly defined purposes of what the individual groups were doing. Everybody had a purpose, everyone had a name, and they knew how to report through. When you look back, we can sit and forensically analyse everything, what went wrong, what went well, and you could do that to the nth degree. But what we've done is taken a strategic approach to what did we gain from, what did we learn positively as well as negatively from the response? Because you can't just focus on the negatives. There were some positive things that came out of how we responded to the COVID. And some of the positive work was that we've got stronger internal and external relationships with stakeholders. County council, there were officers that we didn't know existed, and we now work together with them on long-term projects and things like that. So we now know that when we respond to things, again, it's who can we engage and who can help us. It's not how do we do this on our own, it's how do we do this with others and how do we work together. And that was particularly seen in the community group work, because there was just this outpour of help from the community groups, which we could not have done it alone. So there was a huge thanks that went out to the community groups. The use of remote meetings, I think that's been really beneficial to officers particularly as well, because we were going off to these regional meetings and everybody would drive 3 hours to the meeting, sit in the room, you're only there for one specific part, but it's a whole day gone. We can now do those online, and I think it's the normal practice now that those happen online. So you've got environmental benefits from that as well as time benefits for officers. It enabled us to revisit our remote working policy, so we could have some people working from home on set patterns, or working in the office, more in the office than at home, but it allows officers that need to be at home to focus, to be able to do that. And as Dave Vincent will nod, strengthen our business continuity plans, because it's really the first time they've ever been tested to the degree that they have. One of the biggest things we learned is we were later out with some communications than we could have been, so we've definitely learned from that, and in recent responses to much smaller emergencies. But the first point forward is the comms plan, and getting a really strong comms planning board from day one, rather than, because we were also busy responding, the comms came later, so we know to introduce that earlier. Data sharing is really important, and it's enabled us as organisations to talk about data in a different way. Normally the engagement would have been, no, can't give you that because it's our data, we can't share our data. We now know that with a data sharing agreement, and with each organisation clearly setting out why they're sharing that data, and it's for a common good outcome, there's less resilience to share the data, which is meaning that we can get help out there quicker. We just need to tidy it up. And then some standardised reporting is something that we learned from the process when we were doing the service standard pro formas. We had our CMT agendas. So one of the recommendations from the auditors was that we put that in, and we've now incorporated it into our business continuity plans. So you could talk for hours about what did we learn, what could go better. We do that internally. We're always looking, we're always making processes more efficient, and how can we get help from others, and how do we engage people sooner. But ultimately, as a council, we came together and responded. We worked with the members, we worked with the community groups, third sector, other organisations, county council, combined authority. The biggest challenge was the business grants, which I forever will feel sorry for Sally for, who went through many iterations of getting all of that money out the door as quick as possible. There were pushbacks and challenges because we weren't going fast enough, but yes, there was a slight lag, but it's because we took the time to do checks and balances, which the government soon caught on to. Actually, you probably all should have been doing this all from day one. We're now seeing other authorities that are still scratching their heads, wondering how they're going to retrospectively get this evidence in. We've already got it in hand. So we're on the front foot on the later end. We're on the back foot getting out, but we're on the front foot later. And we're not experiencing all of the fraud issues that other authorities have done. So not to pat ourselves on the back that it took us a while either, but it was good to pause and think, how's the best way to do this rather than simply reacting in order to get money out, and it led to stored up issues later on. So there's lots of things that we could discuss. Happy to do that. So rather than me keep talking, then I'll leave it.
Thank you, Emma. I'd just like to add my sort of thanks to everybody, literally everybody that was involved through what was an unprecedented situation, literally from central government all the way down to county council, parishes, district councils, every member of the public who found themselves in a situation we've never experienced before. And yes, mistakes were made, but the main thing is that they were learned from, acted upon, and actually I think overall, I think we can say this is a very positive response that we were able to give our residents through that situation. And God forbid we should ever return to something like that again, but if we do, I think we'll be much better prepared. So once again, my thanks on that. Any? Councillor Trapp.
So just a small point, 4.5, saying about delays in getting information, and that data held and managed by ARP was one of the contributory delays. And I'm glad in 4.6 that you're actually doing something about it, because I think that ought to be highlighted. It is, we have other items sometimes on the agenda where it does look like ARP is not actually quite on the ball. And I'm looking to the member on the committee on the ARP partnership.
That's perhaps for another discussion, Councillor Trapp.
But I just thought we ought to note that is
absolutely
has to be made much tighter, much quicker.
Thank you. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. It's very noticeable that the report and indeed the presentation of the report are in the past tense. But the pandemic isn't over. Hospital admissions are rising again. There is news recently that one of the latest variants is one that dodges all of the immunities that the vaccinations have brought. We could be very quickly in the same position again this winter, and the likelihood is that we will be. So with that in mind, how quickly can we implement the lessons that we have learned? What are we doing in terms of, for example, our buildings, to ensure that we are as secure as we can be against a really massive resurgence of the virus, and how effective are our systems in terms of being able to stand them all up again at speed?
I think having been through this process, we have changed risk. We've got standard risk assessments now. So in terms of remobilizing or starting up again, I think we could, no, not I think, I know we can do it very quickly, because it's only in our recent history been put into place. So we just reenact those depending on what happens. Yes, you're very right that COVID hasn't gone away. And yes, this is a past tense report, but we are very much alive to the fact that it is in the future. It's still in the present and possibly in the future as well. So we incorporate COVID risk into all of our service planning and I'm looking at Dave, the risk assessments. So there is now, it's a living with COVID assessment. We still have the COVID recovery officer who's working with community groups, still promoting the vaccination. So it's still very much an ongoing process. There is still work being done. As to this building, I'm looking at Spencer and Dave again. We you know, as recently as today, we got some guidance through. So Dave's enacted and circulated that through. So we'll make sure that we comply with all of the new things, and that we are still very much alive to the fact that COVID exists. So just because this is a past tense report doesn't mean that we've forgotten the COVID's in the past. We're very much aware that it's in the present and in the near future as well. And we will react and are able to react more quickly than we did the last time, because we've already got systems in place now. We've got the contacts, we've got them, we know which service managers, we know who to lead on groups and things like that. So we are ready if we need to be.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I think we can safely say that we're not going to be complacent about COVID. And on that basis, are we happy to note the report? Many thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This is the health and safety report for 2021 to 2022. I'll briefly take you through some of the key points of this report. It covers obviously East Cambs District Council, East Cambs Trading Company, and East Cambs Street Scene. Essentially, one of the things that we have obviously done, it's the key measures, and we just obviously talked about, is the COVID measures. Again, during this year, obviously, COVID was very relevant in that situation. Obviously, the things that we've done, we introduced obviously the COVID risk assessments for all our buildings, and that was obviously to make them COVID secure. And obviously, that's a thing that we had to put in place legally as well. So all our workplaces were COVID secure. Obviously, we implemented the social distancing requirements. We had enhanced cleaning regimes, introduced the protective sneeze screens, adequate ventilation, and obviously that's still a key measure as now. Also, the test and trace arrangements. We obviously identified our vulnerable staff, and very importantly, considering the mental health and well-being of staff who were working from home in an isolated position. Obviously, that's one of the key things as well. Obviously, now the government has removed its workplace COVID guidance, and that's now been replaced with public health guidance, which obviously we're following. And we've just recently had new guidance issued by public health in the last week as well. Codes of practice is obviously an essential part of the health and safety management. And again, during the past year, we've reviewed and updated our health and safety policy, and also 8 of our codes of practice, the supporting ones, as you'll see there on page 4 of that document. Again, that's backed up with training for staff. And again, that's done obviously identified through one-to-ones, team meetings, and again, through the council's health and safety working group. Obviously, the amount of training and face-to-face training was impacted by the COVID pandemic. However, we still did deliver, as you'll see in the table laid there, we still trained 142 staff through that year. And again, obviously now training is also back more now to face-to-face during this year. Obviously, training at the Portley Hill Depot is also done via toolbox talks. For a lot of the staff there who don't have computer use. So again, very much that's on a face-to-face basis at the depot. And again, obviously that's backed up with other types of training, induction training specific to the types of job undertaken, the task equipment, and driver CPC training, etc. as well. Health and safety emergencies, again, are controlled obviously there through our fire safety. All our buildings go through 6 monthly no notice fire evacuation drills. And again, obviously we implement fire training. First aid also, we have obviously fully trained first aiders here at the Grange, and then at the depot and the business centres, we have emergency first aid work trained staff. We also have mental health first aiders trained as well to assist staff, and obviously that's very relevant now. Even I know this is a past report, but now with all the Ukraine fighting, the cost of living, etc., mental health is going to be one of the key ones. So we will obviously, hopefully relying on those staff who are trained in that role as well. We also have the health and safety working group, and that meets on a quarterly basis. As you'll see there with the representatives across the council, and very much that's the working group on health and safety to discuss what the priorities are, etc., and approve our codes of practice as well. Occupational health, we work very closely with the occupational health advisor, and again that's a proactive scheme through a risk assessment process for identifying staff that need that health surveillance assessments. And again, that's a check in the skin, arm, hand-on vibration, hearing checks, vision screening, and general lifestyle checks as well. Obviously, that program was impacted during the pandemic, But again, now that's obviously been ramped up and we're catching up now with our staff that need to go through that process as well. Accidents, as you'll see there on page 7 of the report, we had a total of 11 accidents during the year, which was the same as the previous year. And again, we used the incident rate, and again, that's per 100 staff, and that helps us to assess where we are with fluctuations of staff, where it gives us a true reading of our accident rates. And as it's pleasing to see, we're still at 4.5 as the previous year as well. So we are still down on our accident rates. Again, the accidents then go into more details of over the past 5 years. And I say we had this continued downward trend that we're going through, and obviously we hope to keep on that basis as well. During the year, we had one reportable accident to the HSE as a result of a slip trip where an East Cam street scene loader was off work for more than 7 days. Those types of accidents we have to report to the HSE, but we only had one during that year. Lost working days as a result of accidents was a total of 69. And again, that's, you'll see in the tables there, that was a result of 2 accidents, one for 42 days and one for 27 days. But I say overall, you know, we are on a good downward trend with our accidents, and we hope to continue that through this year as well. Section 5 of the report on page 10 there just gives an outline of the actions for this year that we're going through. And again, very much that's supporting what we're doing, reviewing our codes of practice, introducing employee health and safety handbook, and the ongoing training program, etc. as well. So it is a proactive health and safety actions for this year. And the final part of the report there is it was the action plans for 21-22. Pleased to say they're all green. Obviously, the only one that was amber there was the health surveillance program that had to be paused during the pandemic, because obviously that's face to face. But again, obviously now that's all back to the full program going forward, and we're making great progress this year going forward with our health surveillance program. So that's a little run through the report, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave, and thanks for the excellent work there to you and your team. Any comments, questions from members? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item 15, which is gender pay reporting. And if I can ask Nicole to do this one. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. So this report provides the committee with some measurable data on gender pay at the council. As at the 31st of March, the women's mean hourly rate was £16.10 per hour, 7.7% lower than the male mean hourly rate of £17.44 per hour. And the women's median hourly rate was £14.26 per hour, 8.5% lower than the males at £15.59. Table 1 sets out the percentage of men and women in each of the pay quartiles. Females account for 60% in the upper, 71% in the upper middle, 69% in the lower middle, and 75% in the lower quartile. At this time, the workforce comprised of 131 females and 60 males. Section 4.6 sets out how the council's pay gap has changed over the last 3 years. And tables 2, 3, and 4 provide a comparison against other local authorities. The council will continue to build on actions aimed at reducing the gap, such as using structured interviews and skills-based assessments in recruitment and promotion to prevent unfair bias in decisions, encouraging women to negotiate their salaries by showing salary ranges when recruiting, offering flexible working and remote working, offering a structured approach to performance management, offering financial assistance towards childcare costs, and ensuring that part-time employees are well supported and given opportunities to progress. And that's, but members are asked to note the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Any questions? Councillor Harris?
Just a statement. It's really good to see the way that the pay gap is reducing. Just nice to see that. So good work by everybody.
Councillor Whelan?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same. It is good to see that it is reducing, and let's hope it continues to.
I think the comment is we're getting there. Happy to note, members. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Agenda item 16, an assets update. Can I ask Spencer to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's happy just to give a quick update from the report. I can now happily confirm that the security fencing at the depot is now complete and in operation. I've also met with the contractors for the CCTV installation. They've now measured up and are starting to will start to install at any time. So that really will improve things and give us confidence down at the depot. And the tender for the drainage on the site and the proposed septic replacement of the septic tank is the tender is now closed on that and it's been evaluated. So hopefully we'll be able to move forward on that very shortly. Moving on just quickly to 70 Market Street, our new tenant has moved in there for the Kite Trust. I've met with them and they seem very happy at the moment, and hopefully we'll continue to have a good working relationship and make them very happy to be there. Moving on to 72 and 74, I could confirm on Friday I did the last landlord's inspection and we took meter reads, and now our tenant has now moved out of the offices there, and we are now preparing it ready to go back onto market. So that's the sort of operational stuff on our assets. Moving just on to changing places, which is the funding that we can apply for severely disabled people to have a proper changing facility while they're out and about in the public. I can confirm that we have put in our application our maximum we can put in for 3 sites. We have now put in an application for 3 sites, and I can confirm they are 1 in Soham, 1 in Littleport and 1 in Ely. That's pretty much it, Chairman. I'm happy to try and take any questions.
Thanks, Spencer. Any questions from members? Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you for this. Just looking at your Appendix 1 and your public conveniences and your budget, you have £10,000 budget and you've spent £3,009. Have you really spent all of that at that one particular convenience?
I'm afraid to say we have. We had an awful lot of antisocial behaviour at one of our public communities, mainly with graffiti. But what they used this time was that it was impossible for us to remove it ourselves. We had to get in some specialist contractors to come in and remove the offensive graffiti from the premises.
I can see. Councillor Dupre, sorry.
I wasn't sure if you were specifically simply looking for questions at the moment, because I had a comment rather than a question.
Happy to take comment, Councillor Dupre.
I think you just want to come back to the changing places toilets issue, which we had a fairly lengthy discussion, fairly full discussion about at the last meeting of this committee. It was, I think, somewhat of an embarrassment to be named by the government as one of the places with 0 changing places toilets that specifically was asked to put an application in order to do something. But pleased that that has now been resolved and that there has been an application for 3 different locations. That's definitely the right direction to be going in. It's just that we shouldn't have had to go through all of that to get to this point, but I'm very pleased to see that that we finally are. Are we still expecting the report in November?
Yes, because that's a separate report. It was dealing with a separate review because it was about the accessibility of our current provision of toilets. So that's absolutely still coming in November. Yeah. Spencer's not there yet.
Councillor Trapp.
Just a small point. I've noticed in the minutes it said that we would be informing changing places about the toilets at the Hive. I've looked at the map. No, it is not there. There's no. I've looked at the changing places map.
Through you, Chair, we have made the request to change in places.
Okay.
It's, for some reason, it's taking them forever to do it, but the request did go in after that meeting.
But
It's
maybe
just
we ought to
not been
chase it
done.
up.
So what we've done since is we've put those details on our website and I think we're also added, I'm looking at Melanie, we've added the new facilities at the railway station as well. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Well, as councillor Dupre has considered it necessary to raise it in such a manner at this meeting, you know, I think it's worth noting that of course it was incorrect that there weren't any changing places toilets in the district, because there demonstrably was one.
Any further questions, comments? I'm happy to note. Thank you, Spencer. 17. Can I ask Sally, although Sally's not here?
This is just for noting, Chairman, it's just the minutes from the working party.
Okay. Any comments or questions to, yes, to know?
Just a comment that the working party met again yesterday evening. It was a very useful meeting, which Councillor Harris and I were at, and also this morning at the Highways and Transport Committee at the County Council, the committee agreed the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, the LC-WIP, which has been around for a little while now, but finally got discussed and agreed yesterday. And I was liaising with Sally yesterday to make sure that what we expected to see in the LC-WIP was in the LC-WIP. So so far so good.
That's good news. Thank you, Councillor Dupre. We shall note in Sally's absence. Agenda item 18 is the forward agenda plan. Any comments, additions, questions? Noted. We now move to the exempt items. If anyone's not agreeable to that, say now. And so we will move into exempt session.
But we'll wait until it's read down.